Okay. So I figured I'd give it another shot. To be honest with you, as I was going through Great Awakening culture, I don't know what was going on, but boy, I sure wasn't feeling it. So I wanted to go back to it. Um, Now, once again, I have religion here, but to be honest with you, once again, you could make an argument that Greek mythology is not really religion. There's no doctrine to speak of. And it's certainly not a moral or ethical religion, if it is a religion at all. Um, they do have gods, they are worshiping these gods, but it doesn't seem to be a belief system of sorts. I mean, there's stories, but there's no real doctrine per se, like you would see in Buddhism, although Buddhism doesn't have gods. Um, well, for sure, they do have patron deities that they recognize. Basically, all Greeks have the same pantheon of gods, so collection of gods, but each city may focus more attunely on one particular god. Like, for example, hopefully this isn't anachronistic that I'm about to bring up, but, Athena and Athens, for example. Um, and obviously, these patron gods or goddesses, can affect the culture of a given city, or in this case, city state, for sure. So they have patron deities. They all still worship the same pantheon of gods. Um, I will tell you that math and science are going to be affected greatly by philosophy. And certainly we will get to this here pretty soon. So tell you what, I think what I will do is I'll mislay that for now till we get to the point of science. But certainly Greece has some technological advancements to be sure. We also have medicine, speaking of science. Now, they seem to, as they're looking at medicine, and they have things such as surgeries that are going on and so on and so forth, but it seems like as they are viewing medicine, it seems like their central, they seem to base it on what they would call the four humors. These four humors are fluids in the body. So, phlegm, for example, would be a humor. Yellow bile, black bile would be examples of, if you will, humors. Make sure I got that correct there. So, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you have a pretty good balance of those, you're probably in, you're going to be you're likely to be in good health. So blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. And certainly to say a little bit later, you're going to notice that they're going to be tackling some pretty rough stuff, including cancer, right? And I think I'll probably talk about that a little bit later as we get to Hippocrates. But back to philosophy. So Probably the father, it seems like the father, if you will, of ancient Greek philosophy was Thales of Miletus. You will notice apparently Miletus seems to be a pretty decent breeding ground, if you will, for philosophers. Um, there's not much that exists in regards to Miletus. We know of him, but his writings did not survive. Um, we do know that he has a pretty solid view, or is pretty adept at astronomy. We do know that, among other things. We also know that right by him was Examiner, if you will, of Miletus. Examiner, we have an Examiner, excuse me. We know more of him. We have more writings from him that survive. A lot of times when they talk about an Examiner, they talk about this idea of speculative astronomy. So, he's giving you some pretty good or pretty decent suggestions or conjectures about, the heavenly bodies, whether they be stars or planets. He talks about a boundless world, for example. Something else I want to talk about. Oh, yes. He also gives us an interesting viewpoint here. Basically, the water is the basic level of matter, and that the Earth is flat. That you have a flat Earth, and it's kind of like a dome, if you will, that's on top of the Earth. So, you would be pretty hard pressed to go into outer space because, basically because there's a ceiling. For lack of a better word, there's basically a ceiling. Probably the most famous of these, even though we'd say that Thales is probably the father of Greek philosophy, I guess would be Pythagoras. Now, of course, once again, math and science comes into play, right? Because obviously when you think of Pythagoras, you think of a squared plus b squared equals c squared, in regards to a right angled triangle, right? If you're trying to find, the third side of a right angled triangle, you would, have length of A, the length of B. You would square those, you'd square A, you square B, you would add up A and B, and then C squared, and then obviously once you square root it, you would have what you need. There were assorted numbers, types of pottery, whether it be in the shapes of animals or just basic simple shapes. It looks like they likely borrowed some art from the ancient Near East, whether it be Africa, whether it be Egypt or what have you. Architecture. In this particular time period, I guess the only ones we need to concern ourselves is with Doric architecture, Doric columns, and Ionic columns. And it is my guess that you have seen, and we could talk about Corinthian later, but it's my guess that you have likely seen buildings that have, if you will, columns in the design of Doric, columns in the design um, of Ionic, right? That seems to have carried on um, to the present day. Literature. Well, among the written literature, and obviously a lot has not survived, right? Um, but I guess the person, I don't know, the two people that come most to mind are Homer and Sappho. Um, Obviously, Homer is known for the epic, right? Do you know what an epic is? An epic is a story um, that typically focuses on one person and the journey and the adventures of this person. Now, certainly in the time of the ancient Greeks and even later on, they tended to be poems. They tended to be written in meter. But these could be very long poems written in meter, right? We're talking about by today hundreds of pages. Probably Homer's two that come to mind are going to be, and there's a question of whether or not, how much of Homer we really know. There is some question even if he existed, but one story comes to mind is the Iliad, right? The Illiad. And, the Iliad is basically talking about, the Battle of Troy. Troy, which is in Asia Minor. And the journey of Odysseus. And then you have the Odyssey, right? So after he returns from the Iliad, he embarks on another adventure. And of course, this adventure has him in the way of some terrible monsters, right? So, for example, the Cyclops. And also another thing about these poems, as one person has brought up to me as well, you have to understand that their idea of morality may differ from ours present day. And there's a decent amount of what some people may call womanizing in these epic poems. The other person of note would be Sappho. Now, Sappho, let me see here. Actually, either way, I could show it to you. Let me see if I can find one with a name on it. Okay, either way, you know what? Either way, I can show it to you. I know where it is, so. Okay. I do not know if you can see this arrow. You know what? Let's go back. All righty. Okay, so if you were to look here, if you go like a little bit on your right, you will see a city called Troy, okay? Now, if you keep going down, keep going down, you'll run into the Aegean Sea, right? And you'll run into, if you will, an island. Now, you'll see the word Aegean Sea. Now, if you go slightly northeast of that term, Aegean Sea, you'll see this island. That island is called Lesbos. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, Sappho is from the island of Lesbos. Now, there are some questions about Sappho. Sappho wrote poems. She wrote sensual poems, sexual poems, if you will. They could be a little bit lively. But people, they wondered about some of the poems that Sappho wrote. And there seem to be some poems perhaps about women. We're not quite sure where to place. Well, okay, let me put it this way. I am not sure exactly what you would, what sexuality Sappho may be. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into this, but, I don't know if she was heterosexual. I don't know if she was lesbian. I don't know if she was bisexual or pansexual. I wouldn't be surprised if she was bisexual, but I'm not going to speculate too much on that. It also appears that she had a child. So, that also enters into the complications. Most of the poems that she has in existence, they tend to be fragments of poems. So, if you have an entire poem of Sappho, you're probably in pretty good shape. As always, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please let me know. And, certainly let me know if you know something in addition. I don't mind that. All righty. I think what I want to do is just end talking a little bit about about facing the Persians. This is the Persian Wars. Excuse me. All right. Almost got ahead of myself and I almost said Peloponnesian Wars, but that's not what this is. All righty. So this is not going to be the only time the Greeks are going to face the Persians, but they definitely had an issue with them. One of the issues they had was that Darius seemed to be advancing upon the Greeks. I'm saying seemed, understatement. And he actually took some earlier Greek colonies. He took some Greek colonies earlier. And obviously, this scared, if you will, the Greeks, because they're thinking, well, where is he going to stop? And looking at the size of the Persian Empire, it doesn't look like he's going to stop much of anywhere. We do know that there was a revolt by the Ionians, led by Aristarchus of Miletus. There comes that name again. And the Greek city-states. This Persian War will lead, if you will, to a number of the major Greek city-states coming together. This is going to include the Greek city-state, and we're in the classical period, by the way. Earlier Greek city-states of Athens and Sparta. Oh boy. Yes, it's going to be interesting with Sparta. Well, the Persians were a handful. And the Athens were going to need as many city-states, the Athenians were going to need as many city-states as possible, if you will, to take them down. And certainly they wanted the help of Sparta. Sparta, which is probably your most militarized or militaristic Greek city-state. And it brings us to some interesting things. One of them was they were fighting the Battle of Marathon, and they were hoping to get help from the Spartans. And they actually sent a professional runner, Phidippides. Now, don't be surprised if you wind up getting different numbers here. But according to one of these, Phidippides was a professional runner who managed somehow to run 140 miles to ask for the help from the Spartans, and the Spartans said no. And then somehow or another, he runs an additional 20 miles to tell of the victory, or 20 miles, or maybe it's 26. I forget what the heck it was, but at any rate, in that shorter run, he drops dead. So it's not the 140 miles that kills them, but it's like the 20-mile run. You know, take with it what you will. But the point is that the Greeks were able to defeat the Persians, if you will, at the Battle of Marathon. Here is, if you will, a look at the Persian Empire. This is massive. You know, I mean, the Greeks aren't this large, at least not yet. This is a massive empire. Well, one of the things that seemed to help the Greeks along was a tight formation. A formation that could allow them to deflect blows from the Persians, but at the same time be flexible for them to attack themselves. It was known as a hoplite phalanx, and as you see here, here it is. And obviously, the beauty is in the shields and the spears. As you can tell, they have relatively long spears. They would move in concert to protect one another. They would move in a bunched formation. Well, this hoplite phalanx, if you will, served the Greeks well. The first invasion in regards to the Persian Empire was won by the Greeks. And then later comes a second Persian invasion. Now, Darius the Great, or Darius the Mede, actually dies in preparation. And so his son, Xerxes, takes the helm. And Themistocles does for the Athenians. And this time they're able to get the help of the Spartans. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie 300, but if you want to, this would be a very good movie, I think, for extra credit. Obviously, you would talk to me first before you would do it. Don't just write it and, no. Talk to me first if you wanted to. But the Spartan king, if you will, King Leonidas, bravely fights, if you will, the Persians with, well, as the name suggests, 300 men. Right over here. Well, unfortunately, Leonidas fighting with 300 men against a formidable Persian army. Well, unfortunately, they lose, clearly. It's not going to work out. But in 469, the Athenians were able to get key wins, key victories against the Persians. And as a result, the Persians will indeed win out against, let me get back here, will indeed win out against the so-called Persians, against the Persians. All righty, so what I'm going to do is end here, and then we should be starting on Greek democracy. All right, good luck, y'all. Take care.